Len, when are you gonna run around the block again?
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm moving around. It's just that yeah. No, I've walked all the way to Dyckman Street through the park. I'm just moving much slower than I usually do, and tonight I decided I'll stay here. Yeah. But I'm doing much, much better. Thank
Good.
you.
So
Get out there. I walk every morning.
we don't have Heidi yet. So is there someone who is, or did I just hear a voice? No. So is there someone who is volunteering to take minutes until she gets here?
I did.
Thank you so much.
How come
I'll
you don't have the
volunteer
minutes?
one day. I'm just so bad. I feel like that's not my word.
I don't see how come you don't have it.
Yeah.
On the
computer.
All
right.
Let's,
Should have brought
I
my
got on the
computer.
computer.
That's my phone. You said
Oh.
that's fine. Oh, you're on the internet. Yeah. Um,
Wi-Fi is fine.
oh, thank you. Last night we had such problems with this.
Oh, really?
Like,
So-
the internet kept going
I can't see who's here. Attendees.
The problem, Wayne, is we can't see I can't see your face. I see a beautiful
It's,
laptop.
yeah, it's the owl is in an odd position.
Well, maybe move the owl.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what I'm in the process of doing without
Excellent.
disconnecting it.
Excellent.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello, Daniel.
Oh, what's up, Jim?
I'm doing fine. Being
Nice.
lazy.
So I see Jose from City Planning, but I do not yet see Audrey, who is doing the Manhattan planning. So is there, Jose, can you give an update on her ETA?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Audrey is out sick today. I'm
Ah.
covering. So, are you asking about a Manhattan Plan update?
Well, yeah, she was gonna do that.
Yeah. So, in terms of update,
Well, no, not yet. I'm just asking who's gonna
oh
do
yeah,
that. So you're gonna do that instead of her?
yeah, but I don't have a full update. It's just gonna be a few words.
Okay, was she going to have something more?
No,
So you're gonna deliver whatever she was gonna deliver then?
correct.
Okay. All right, so when we begin, we'll get that started. Let me see who else is online. Okay. Hello. So it is, let me try this. So it's 7:03. We're gonna call the October meeting of the Land Use Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. I'm Wayne Benjamin and I chair the Land Use Committee for Manhattan Community Board 12. And, before we get into the agenda, I'd like my fellow committee members to introduce themselves. So starting at my left and then working around the table.
I am Eitan Steinbaum. This is my second land use meeting and I am new to the community board this year. I'm very excited to be here. Law student, so.
I'm Heidi Guzman and I'm the assistant chair of this committee.
I'm Melissa Sims and I'm also a new member and I'm an Inwood resident and happy to be here. And I'm Ann Megas, also a new member, Washington Heights resident, happy to be here.
And online,
Who goes
Jim,
first?
can you hear?
Yeah, I'm Jim Berlin. I'm joining you online. It's a pleasure. It was so pleased to have new members. And I think you will find the work of this committee really, you probably already have seen that the work of this committee is very, very interesting.
Thank you, Jim. So we're introducing ourselves. So two more have just joined us. So directly across from me is,
Vivian Ducat. I'm a public member of this committee and have been for a long time.
and at the end of the table in green.
Hi, my name is Daniel Bonilla and I am here.
So we've got a few items on the agenda. The first one being, an update from city planning on the Manhattan Plan, and that's what I was asking Jose about. It was supposed to be delivered to us by Audrey, but Audrey is not available today. And just as a quick update, we discussed the Manhattan Plan in the spring, and it is not a rezoning or a specific proposal. It is, and Jose can give you more specifics. It's initiative undertaken by city planning to gather input directly from residents and all stakeholders on, housing and planning issues. So instead of having an initiative where they are only speaking, for example, to community boards, they wanted to do something broader. And I compared that to the initiative that we in fact undertook years ago, working with the Historic Districts Council to do a survey to ask people, what buildings or areas would you like to see landmarked and why? And there is, I think a report is supposed to come out towards the end of this year. So, Jose, if you can give us whatever brief update, Audrey is going to provide, but before we do that, I also want to note that we have O.C. Kaminer, a board member who's also with us online.
Hi.
Hi.
And we also have Indiana Porto online. All these people are popping up online. So Jose, you should be able to speak.
Hi, everyone. Can you, again, I think you can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Yes. So in
Can't
terms of
see you, though.
updates, we are, the comment period has ended. So that was kind of like the survey period where we had all community boards, all the public in general, New Yorkers, to share their ideas and comments for where housing can be developed in Manhattan. And this includes like big ideas like, building over rail yards, housing in Government Island, and all these big picture ideas. The next step for this is for the department to go over the engagement results and highlight projects that have potentially already achieved some of these ideas. For example, MSMX, which was a recent project just approved for the allowing housing in midtown areas where housing wasn't permitted before, and also mapping R11, R12 districts near transit sites, and other projects like that. So we are working on a time crunch right now. Actually, I just left a meeting with executive office about 5:50 or so, and where we are looking at this, all the engagement strategies were called, and putting feature projects where the consultants are gonna, put this together. And again, I think one of the things on this Manhattan Plan has been perhaps the choosing of the name. We had said multiple times it's a plan, kind of like a roadmap, but it's not gonna be an actual actionable item at the moment. You guys know now that we're gonna have a transition in the administration. So what we are doing now with the Manhattan Plan is putting all these big picture ideas, project sites, or specific geographies that have been shared by the public into the next administration briefing, similar to what we do a transition memo when an administration changes. And then from them, hopefully pick some, the administration and the agency will pick different projects to pursue in the future. So that's what I have for the Manhattan Plan. And yes, Wayne, you're correct that the timing for this is end of the year for the public report to come out.
Okay, and there was an email that came into the office, I think earlier today, perhaps last night, asking if CB 12 made any recommendations with regard to the Manhattan Plan. And, as I mentioned, this is not something where city planning was reaching out to the community boards per se to give input. Anyone and everyone had the ability to submit ideas to the portal that was created. What we did, however, was to share with city planning all of the resolutions that CB 12 has adopted in the past that address, what the Manhattan Plan is talking about in terms of, where housing can be built, how affordability should be defined, some planning and design principles. So those are not new resolutions, but these are in fact actions taken by the board that pertain to what you're looking at, Jose. And I did see acknowledgements that those were received. So I guess the question is, how do those documents get reflected in the report?
Correct. So that's what we're working on right now. For example, I can say that in general for Upper Manhattan, the kind of like the strategies that have been collected for CB 12 specifically, having developing housing along Broadway and looking at near the one train development. So kind of like that is a big picture idea taken from the engagement and the feedback that we got from community board, from the public, that perhaps above along Broadway up to, I can't remember if it was 165 and 181st, that potentially was a site that could, support more housing or have the ability to, support the housing that could be created. But again, these are, that is some area that is very broad in general, and I think we're doing that intentionally in order to, if the next administration comes in and wants to do something similar, as you guys recall, the previous administration when with de Blasio was specifically neighborhood rezoning, we had the ability to, expand a little more and work together for a neighborhood plan on those things. So the Manhattan Plan is taking that general approach and rather than having a specific, well-defined specific ideas. We're thinking the engagement results from housing in Broadway, housing along the waterfront areas, projects that have resiliency and the waterfront pedestrian access plan that is very similar to what was implemented in Inwood as feature projects to highlight in the Manhattan Plan that can be replicated elsewhere.
Are there questions, comments from the committee? And for that matter, did anyone submit or encourage neighbors to submit anything, to the portal for city planning to consider? Sounds like a resounding no.
Yes.
Was this got portal that was sent out last year, right?
Well, no, earlier this year, because remember, we only discussed the Manhattan Plan in the spring. So there was an email address, and that was the portal where if someone had an idea that, you could put housing here or build it there, you didn't need to go through the community board. You simply submit it to that email address.
Is that still open?
Is that portal still open? Jose?
Sorry, I was put on mute. No, the comment period has ended now. So now
Okay.
it's the next step is just collecting those that engagement and ensuring that they fit with the future projects that we are going to highlight in the Manhattan Plan report.
Okay, Indiana, are you in here as a panelist? Cause I should be able to, anyway, I see your hand. Can you speak? Can we hear you? Indiana?
Now, I just got the invite now. Thank you. I was just curious, I know that you're preparing a report, but there's no, just I want to make sure I understand. There's no funding committed to this, right? So the reason I ask is because there will be a change in the administration. I wasn't sure if it's something that like you guys may ultimately scrap, or if there's already like funding committed to this or some other type of commitment that's already been made.
Correct. Yeah, there is no funding committed to this. You know, as I was mentioning, this part of the transition period and transition information that we'll provide to the next administration. You know, this is similar to plans. I remember I shared with you guys when we were working in housing opportunity or even economic opportunity, where previous plans are already, done by DCP that have built on those initiatives at the time. So it's likely that, you know, the Manhattan plan, the industrial plan as well, we are part of like the roadmap for future initiatives that will come with the next administration.
Right.
Got it.
So
Thank you.
the Manhattan plan, and I can see where the name of it causes confusion. It's not a capital project. It's not related to a capital project, and it's not leading to a capital project. The report may incentivize actual projects to move forward, but it's not as if this Manhattan plan is, you know, a specific capital undertaking.
Correct, Wayne.
And let me see if I can fix Indiana's. Okay, so she should be coming in now as a panelist. Great.
I'm trying to remember if I ever attended to any of like my run clubs.
Well, unfortunately, the comment period is over. But I mean, once again, it's going to yield a report, and that report will then presumably yield multiple projects. So there'll be an opportunity to for us to review and comment on the report when it comes out. But as the projects then are, you know, developed from the report, you know, we have an opportunity to comment on those as well. But that is why it's important to make sure we don't miss our deadlines.
I wonder if Catherine sent it out like email, like those like email blasts.
I have no idea. I know that I sent it to the committee, and it probably was in one of our you know, newsletter blasts. But as I said, you know, we CB12 and residents have talked about a number of things relative to housing, and we've passed a number of resolutions. I think Jose was talking about, you know, resiliency at the waterfront and all that. You remember we passed a couple of resolutions of that. So they have copies of all of those. So things that we've discussed that relate to housing and, you know, related urban design issues has been shared with them, sent to the portal, and that's why I was asking, how do those get reflected in the report? I'm going to lose my voice this evening, I'm sure.
You want some tea?
No, I've had my tea. You're going to send me to the bath? Yes. Could you identify yourself for the minute, please?
My name is Benita Mock, and I'm a community member. I live in the community in Washington Heights.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. This is my first meeting, so thank you very much.
Nice.
So I just wonder how much of a response came from community members, if any, on the portal, and what, if any, other community boards are involved with making suggestions through the portal, and what percentage of responses were received through the open portal.
Right.
And if it's possible, since they hadn't had any responses or a low number percentage, or I guess a low percentage of responses, are they planning to reopen or no?
Yep, it is a citywide initiative, so, I mean, but Jose, did you hear the question?
I definitely heard the question, and I wanted to also say something in here. So, as opposed to like City of Yes, that was indeed DCP led initiative where like myself, Audrey, we're doing the outreach. We're working hands on the engagement process. The Manhattan Plan was RFP for engagement. So I can get those numbers. I know there was a good turnout of different the survey, there was the website, there was also direct engagement on different parts of Manhattan. So I'm pretty sure I can get those numbers, but I don't have them with me right now. But we can definitely send it to you, Wayne. I just have to request that from the people leading the Manhattan Plan and the consultant team.
Okay, and when I said it was citywide, I should have said it was borough-wide.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in fact, I looked back and I don't think it ever went through the board's like weekly email, but they did send an email to like community members about different events. They were like the tabling events that Jose was talking about at various parks in June and I think maybe possibly in July. So they were doing some of that.
Yeah, when they presented to us months ago, they pointed out that, they were taking advantage of, events that organizations were having to have a table there to do that outreach. So it wasn't just, here it is online. I think that identified like the farmers market and other things that were happening anyway. So they would take advantage and leverage those activities to be there and get people to fill out the form. And people who didn't want to do it online, I think they had the paper versions for wheel timers.
I do remember I was talking about that, like,
Yeah. Anything further from the room on the Manhattan Plan? Or OC or Jim?
Nope.
Okay. So as I say, hearing none, thank you, Jose. The question raised about the sort of the response, we appreciate getting that feedback so we can then, share it. And we look forward to receiving the report and we will get back to you, whomever the person is, with our, comments on it. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. The next item on the agenda, and this is something for the new members we go through every year in October, and that is, the capital and expense. So I'm gonna lose my voice. You're gonna cough. Who's next?
It's not communicable, it's a condition thing. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. No
Response to Wayne.
It's a response to me.
I don't want to be alone.
Is the expense and capital priorities for the coming fiscal year. And one of the things that I think we discussed the last executive committee meeting in September is the need to really consolidate our requests and, focus in on, what it is we really want to push for, as opposed to having an extensive list. At the end of the day, in some cases, we are internally competing against ourselves. What do I mean by that? You will have, for example, Housing and Human Services asking for a project that is also asked for by the Committee for the Aging, that's also asked for, and it's the same project. And in the past, we've had opportunities where committees have worked together and said, let's consolidate all into one ask, because either the same project or very similar. And there've been instances where some committee or committee chairs have said, well, no, my committee wants to have it listed under, theirs, and we don't agree to consolidate. So what happens? If we can only rank, 35 projects, for example, if you have duplications in there, we're fighting against ourselves. The idea is to trim that down and focus. That is not so much a land use issue because folks who've been on the committee longer than I, which would be, I guess, Jim, no, in years or more like decades past, it was rare for land use to have any capital or expense, because given the nature of what we do, it's really not something that we're asking for specific projects to move forward. However, what we started a few years ago was focusing in on sort of planning initiatives that would generate development projects and also expense initiatives that would help with community-based planning. And what I'm going to suggest is, and we started talking about the expense part a little bit last year. We have other means if we're looking for funding to have a consultant work with us. When I say us, the community board and the community on a planning initiative. And we started the conversation last year, but we didn't quite conclude it, so it was left in. Instead of asking for an expense item from city planning or whomever to hire more planners to work with us, we can just go to the borough president or our city council rep and say, we need funds to hire a consultant to work with us. And that then does not become an expense item that's competing with something else. And the example of this is when we did, at this juncture, the first and only district-wide neighborhood planning and land use study back, I think, from 2004 to 2007, with the help of, I think, Virginia Fields and a grant from Harlem Community Development Corporation, and I believe also funding from our council person at the time. We hired the then City College Architecture Center, which is now the JMX Bond Center, to work with us to complete the study that is posted to our website. So we didn't say in the planning study, or rather in the expense process, give us money to do that. We put out an RFP, we got 3 proposals, we picked the one we wanted to work with, and then we went to our elected officials and said, help us do this. And so I would say that, we could potentially, once again, eliminate this, ask for city planning to dedicate more staff and just directly say, if there's something that we want to look at vis-a-vis updating the study or doing something that is more pertinent to what they show now, let's just do it directly, outline that scope, maybe get some proposals, then ask our elected officials to help us fund it. But your thoughts on that? Dummy.
I guess to that end, is that suggesting removing this expense item altogether?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, I don't think, city planning and the mayor's, they haven't been increasing their staffing at all, and we're saying we want staffing dedicated to us.
Right.
And it's not that it's a ridiculous ask, because, having, I think in years past, maybe in decades past, city planning had more staff sort of in their neighborhood planning offices, I believe they were called. But I think that staffing has been reduced. So I think eliminating it and being more direct, doing what we did in the past, would be the way to handle the expense item. So Jim, you were the only member, or maybe Vivian, were you on the committee when we did the planning study?
You were just, yes, the first year. I mean, the last.
So what are your thoughts on taking that approach?
I think we would need help to research some of the preservation side of it, certainly.
Right, but we could be more direct with, this is what we want to do.
Right.
And Carmen De La Rosa and Sean Abreu and whoever the borough president is, who they would say, we need money. And we would then control that, as opposed to saying to city planning, you hire staff and then you assign the staff and maybe they get to work with us.
You could also, I mean, it's 20 years later almost, so you could actually look at it that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Jim? OC, are you able to unmute yourself? You cannot, let me see if I could do something about that. No? No?
Cannot talk.
She cannot talk.
Okay.
So I'm losing my voice, but she lost her voice and you're saying, this is a real good meeting. But OC, I think, said in chat that she agrees. Jim is already a panelist, but I don't hear anything from Jim. So absent any further comment, I think there's consensus for the minutes that that expense item for this year, we will eliminate and we'll take a different approach with that. And with that, I will say, as you mentioned, Vivian, the planning study is like at this juncture, 20 years old. One approach can be taking a look at that and updating it. There may be other land use and planning issues that were not addressed in that study that we want to address now. So I would say if everyone could take a look at the study and say, what is it you would say we need to update? And what is it we should add to it that wasn't there? I mean, for example, I don't know to what extent we dealt with resiliency in that study. So that may be something where we want to have more attention, given to that.
What about the idea of zoning, updating some of the zoning?
We talked about contextual zoning and other things. I mean, that was the first time I think CB12 talked in any depth about contextual zoning, about historic preservation. And interestingly, that study pointed out that the earned income tax credit, so it's not even zoning, was worth more at that time when they looked at the average income. It was worth more to residents than Section 8 when they ran the numbers. So, that was an interesting outcome of that as well. And people didn't necessarily know about or know enough about the earned income tax credit.
Excuse me, Wayne, if I might.
Yes, we were looking for you.
Well, here I am. Technically, although you have a consensus about removing this thing, technically, we should have a vote at some point.
Well, yes, but I was just having the
Oh, yeah,
conversation.
but I just wanted to,
Yes.
thank you.
Two points of curiosity.
Sure.
What year was that last study? I'm sorry, I missed that.
It was completed in 2007.
Okay. And,
But it started, I think, in like 2004.
okay. And was there any cost associated with the avenue that we used when we used the CCNY?
I think it
Was
was
it
like
students or faculty and?
it was a combination.
Uh-huh,
And I believe it was like a $96,000 study.
okay.
And I would say if you compare that, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't think I am, the 197A plan that CB9 did about the time when Manhattanville was being done, that was a several $100,000 study. So we were looking for something that was more economical and more targeted as well. And I would also say that one of the things that the bond center has pointed out, they're working a lot with creating means to measure impacts of proposals as opposed to doing traditional planning studies that you put on the shelf. So that if you're building XYZ, what are the key factors that you could measure and how does that impact, the community in terms of income or whatever? So that's also something, that level of, what are the things that you can measure? It was probably not as built into the study then. And for example, if we went back to the bond center and said, we want to, look at that, that would be something. We did speak with them about creating a digital planning platform for CB 12, and I believe they created something like that for CB 9. Where this was years ago, where it's, you know, GIS. And by this time, it's probably has greater capacity because, you know, technology evolves. The community board would tell them, or I think they were a consultant, what is it we want to look at? So it's not sort of a one size fits all. If we're particularly interested in looking at housing and transportation or flooding or whatever, the platform would be developed so that the ability to search and to manipulate data for, you know, those layers of information would be readily accessible. So it's like we tell them what we want to be able to do, you know, with the platform. And I believe, at least at the time, I forgot who the owner or manufacturer of that system is. There was a discounted price license for nonprofits, and we would qualify as that nonprofit. So yeah, there's a lot that we've talked about that we can, you know, pursue absent putting it in as an expense item. It's just that, you know, we've talked about it and it's kind of gone by the wayside.
What's the timing on like when you would get like I guess I just don't know enough about the budget. Like if we keep it on here as opposed to like trying to get it from elected officials or whatever. What's that?
You know, there is in, well, I was, yeah, that's exactly the point. When we do the process, you know, all the community boards submit their priorities. It goes to, I think it used to go to mayor's, but you know, it goes to city government. And then you know, it's reviewed and you get a response. And so you say you want to do X, Y, and Z. And the report says, well, the agency says yes, no, or whatever. In some cases, we have found the response is either too vague, or it might say, yeah, we agree with that, but you need to go and speak to the agency about that in more detail, or speak to. So it can be somewhat of a black hole, or it could be sort of an exercise in going through the exercise. Whereas if we were saying we've developed a scope for what we want to study, we are in control of going to our elected officials and saying, or having them come to the meeting, or maybe they work with us to develop the scope. That, you know, this is what we want to look at, and this is what we need. They have discretionary funds. Or they may say, this is the cycle for discretionary funds, and this is when you need to get us that proposal. So I mean, we are much more in the driver's seat if we do it that way. We're not asking an agency to allocate funds or staff that's under its control. We're saying, you know, we want to have, and in many cases, the money has to flow through an agency, but that's fine because it's dedicated to a purpose. It's dedicated to a project.
Yeah, I think that's even more reason to go like knocking it off of this one.
So I would say before moving on to the discussion of capital, on Jim's point, there seems to be consensus of removing or not moving forward with an expense item this year. So like removing from consideration the expense item that we used last year, and that was a modification of expense items that we put in the past. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Those in favor, and this would be committee members? So that is any opposed or abstaining? And I just want to point out for our attendees, at committee meetings, unlike at a general meeting, members of the public are can be part of the conversation and can also vote on it. So if you listening to our back and forth, how to handle that.
Procedure work, raising our hand.
Yeah, I mean, so right now we're voting on a resolution to not put this discussion, this request for funding for planning staff in the request for priorities, but instead to pursue it more directly as we did in the past when we under the planning study. And so we just voted on the committee members, and then we could also ask if any members of the public would like to vote, they can do so as well. And if there are any members of the public who are in favor, you can raise your hand.
I don't think I have enough information.
In which case, we could say any opposed or abstaining.
Abstain.
And also, you do not, I mean, you are able to vote, you do not have to vote. But I just wanted you to understand that at committee member, committee meeting level, you are able to vote.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so moving to the capital, and this is something that we've tweaked over the years. But conceptually, what we were saying, years ago was to, identify all of the vacant city-owned land, put that in one or more RFPs for the development of affordable housing, and allocate, tax credits and capital grant funds to that, so those developments can be affordable. I think last year we modified it to specifically tie it to Mark Levine's Housing Manhattan Nights plan, which interestingly enough picked up on some of that, because I mean, that's what it was doing. And the question is, do we keep that in as an ask, or do we say sort of along the lines of what Catherine was saying, it would be more effective to target specific housing projects that Housing and Human Services has identified, as opposed to the more broader concept of a development strategy that would support those projects.
I'm sorry, one more question. Are you talking about existing properties, or are you talking about properties to be built?
To be built.
Okay, and do you have criterion that you set or establish in order to give I guess a more narrow idea of what you're looking for?
Interestingly enough, no, that's what we meaning the committee and then the board passed a resolution, but we passed many resolutions where we've talked about how you should define affordability, how new buildings should relate to their context, how open space should be, considered. I don't have it, actually, maybe I do have it, because I was going to discuss it, but yeah, we and the Housing and Human Services look at that. We discussed that there are different populations that have different housing needs. I mean, you have one of the largest concentrations of people aging in place. So there's a tremendous need for senior housing, but if you look at the age of our buildings, many of them are not accessible. Too many stairs. So, I mean, but with ADA, any new building would need to be accessible. You have the need for family size units, which is something we constantly run up against, because I was attending a public hearing for CB9 yesterday for the project on 145th and Amsterdam, if you're familiar, and it's like 69% studios. So there's that. And also, there's supportive housing and transitional housing. So I forgot how we phrased it, but we needed to address the different housing needs. So yeah, we do that. But this is what from the land use perspective, our capital ask was more generic. It was saying it's a strategy of pulling together, all of this land that could be developed into housing, and to do what the city did, quite frankly, decades ago in Harlem and the South Bronx and Brooklyn, where they put out RFPs that said these is vacant brownstones, vacant tenement building land. We want development that is going to be rental, or it's going to be home ownership. We've got some subsidy dollars to go with that. We've got some low index sort of crowd, and put out an RFP. So we said, we don't have large swaths of land, but if you look at the concentration of, vacant lots, they once were housing, they could be housing once again, and you need to incentivize that. So we're saying as a strategy that Housing and Human Services Committee on the end may say the site on 190th and St. Nick, that can be, that specific project. So that's kind of what I'm saying, whether, we continue to suggest this planning development strategy, or do we say we defer to specific projects that Housing and Human Services, or maybe the Committee for the Needs of the Aging, are advocating for?
Wayne, if I may, I am the chair of the Housing and Human Services Committee.
I can't see you.
No, sorry, but I am here.
Yes, that's Indiana. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I chair now the Housing and Human Services Committee, and I have a little bit of like a taking one step back because of the turnover that will really start to kick in with community boards, like membership. One consideration I have is, I don't know that I have the expertise, and even among my committee, that we would really be able to like identify specific, projects or properties. So just kind of maybe at least in this initial cycle or two, it may be helpful to work closely with this committee, with land use, to identify properties. I don't know that like we have a set of, properties that we've already identified or that we have the expertise really on the committee yet to say like, these are the 3 places where we think, we should propose ideas for.
Very good point. Very good point. Yes, sir. And could you identify yourself for the
Yes,
minutes?
I'm Dexter Newman. I'm a building consultant. I also lived here all my life.
When you say you're a building consultant, what does that mean?
I've done actually land use reports when I first worked in an architecture office.
And why did you apply to be on the community board?
Well, I'm here to find out if you need me.
Oh, yes, we do.
I figured I would come and find out what you guys are up to and see if there was some place I could offer some use. But what I've been doing for the last 20 years is I've gotten out of the architecture office and I've been doing the red tape of expediting all the projects through the Department of Buildings and the fire department. And
My sympathies.
yes, so I deal with this type of idea all the time.
Yeah.
But I wondered if, when you're talking about strategies versus specific projects, if one of the strategies, I don't know, maybe in Manhattan, we don't have so much of this happening, but the changeover from all the commercial spaces, which we're not using anymore, to residential, in the past, it's been lofts, turning over to residential, but there must be so much building that maybe was even begun and not finished. That could be a prime example of something that could be used to still be built out to whatever is needed for senior housing or more worker housing, more studios or more 3 bedrooms.
Yeah, we, and I don't recall actually, I think it was in the context of a particular mixed-use project where it's a new construction. I believe it's the Radio Hotel that has newly built commercial space, but the rent up of that space was, and probably maybe still is, taking a while. And one of our suggestions was, why don't you consider converting that commercial space to residential? Because when the project was originally presented to us, because it needed, I believe, a BSA special permit, it was not clear why commercial office as opposed to residential was not one of the 3 components. There's a hotel, there's, retail space with a very expensive restaurant that I've yet to visit. I hear it's good. And, office space. So we have discussed that. We don't have the concentration, let's say, of older office buildings like in Midtown or downtown. And there are great opportunities to convert those. They are not necessarily converted to affordable housing unless someone throws some, subsidy in there. But we have discussed, yeah.
And how about housing for, seems to be a need for housing for youth that is a home-based youth alternative to juvenile centers.
And I think every year the Youth and Education Committee has as one of their capital requests, housing for youth, particularly for youth aging out of the foster care system. So yeah, that's why I'm saying, there are some specific projects that come up. And then there is like the planning strategy, and this is not so much a case where they're competing, because, any of those, whether it's, for seniors or for youth, would be consistent with the idea of identifying the land, getting it in a development process, but more importantly, or as importantly, targeting public dollars so that it becomes affordable. Because if you just do the development, as you probably know, it costs a lot to build in New York City.
Yeah.
And even if you're building non-union, it's still going to be expensive. And unless there's subsidy dollars to buy down that cost, you're building new housing, but you're not building new affordable housing.
So renovation is the other option instead of trying to do all of that work of digging the foundation and creating something new, which has got to be, of course, something that's going to be making you money for thousands of years, instead of renovating a place to maybe rezone it if it's commercial to something that is residential and much less costly to build, and you're using the same. It could be a land use issue if it needs to change zoning or need some special permits.
I was gonna mention one thing too.
Yes.
Unfortunately, as times are right now, there's so many strings attached to the public money. And a lot of businesses, a lot of developers are not willing to take that money, because then they have to worry about, if we're gonna build this building and it's gotta be affordable, then we have to get this tax money, and then we have to make sure that, and sometimes the margins to make money are so small.
Mhm.
And they only have this tax incentive available for a short period of time. So I know that they did the, 421M or whatever the
Yeah,
program is,
421,
right?
yeah.
And they created that because that was supposed to take over from 421A. But unfortunately, it does not have the same, they're not getting the benefit out of that they thought they would. So I think right now we have to bring more heads to the table, people who have the ideas and the knowledge and I guess the understanding of what goes on in the community. I've been in this community for a while, and my background is a real estate broker. And I happened to come to this meeting not expecting the conversation to be what it is, but walking around the neighborhood, I see so many vacant lots. I see so many vacant buildings. I see so many restaurants. The turnover is every 6 months to every year. I see a lot of inventory. I see a lot of potential, but we have to bring something to the owners of these buildings that's gonna be a little bit more, how should I say, profitable than just giving them a tax incentive that only lasts a short time, and then they have to cut costs in order to make a small, tiny profit. I have so many great ideas. I tell you, like, I've been doing research for years for this. And when I bring it to different, I spoke with a couple of, let's say, assembly people, and we gave them some ideas on how to bring forth some affordable housing, senior housing. And I said, first of all, we have to prioritize what we really need in our community. And we have to prioritize, we have a larger, greater need right now for senior citizen housing. And if we can move senior citizens into some of these affordable housing situations, we could actually free up a ton of space for families, because you have a lot of seniors who are living in larger spaces and they don't really need that large space. And they're intimidated by that large space because it's too much home for them. So there are a lot of things we could do, but we really have to kind of bring people to the table who have the expertise. And there are a lot of people I talk to in different meetings and they say, can we do this? I said, you know, you got to be careful when you start telling people we're going to do this in the community and start opening the table to say, come to the table, let's plan, let's see what we can do. Let's give some tax incentives that are realistic, but we don't want the same companies getting the money that have been taking advantage for years and aren't giving the affordable housing that they say they're going to give. Because I can mention like 10 companies right now who always say affordable housing. And when it comes to the table, affordable housing is a 1-bedroom for $3,000 a month. How many people can pay that?
So you mentioned something that is important,
Yes.
and actually the two of you, and that is understanding the sort of the dollars and cents of development, but also of operating and maintaining a building. And I'm on a steering committee that's looking at proposing a new business improvement district in Lower Washington Heights. And most of the buildings involved are residential buildings with ground floor retail. So we're speaking to property owners, and this is going back a couple of years, where they're interested, but they point out, as you said, you know, how expensive it is to maintain. And the older buildings, you know, I mean, you have more things to fix. And the simple example, someone said, if it cost me $1,000 to operate and maintain something, but I can only charge 800, I'm just slowly going out of business. And the politics of things can become so heated that no one is sitting down and saying, what's the reality? And I live in a building that was where the tenants took it over and bought it from the city back in the early 80s. So we know what it costs to do everything. But I don't think most people have, you know, that perspective. And you mentioned the same developers who, you know, will say affordable but not deliver. But in some cases, it's not the developers that are doing so. If you look at the program, what the city is saying counts as affordable. And that's why I pointed out in the resolution that we passed, but we're not unique. Most of the community boards uptown, 9, 10, 11, 12, say you need to look at what is the area median income in the community. And that's how you need to define it. And as Bill Clinton said, it's just math. So if in Washington Heights and Inwood, and may have changed, our AMI, you know, is about 52% of the citywide. It's not so hard to say, well, if the citywide is $80,000, for us, you need 52% of that for it to be affordable. I mean, you don't need a long conversation. It's just like cut it in half. And yeah.
Create people moving from Chelsea because.
But no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you say the citywide area median income is 80,000, that was years ago.
Right.
And you are HPD and you put together an affordable housing program and you say you're going to use, you know, 80%, for example, of $80,000 to define affordability, that may be generically okay. But in Washington Heights and Inwood, you need to do 80% of $50,000, and it's just math. But I mean, but the programs, the way they are structured, and once again, it's not necessarily the city's fault, because if they're working with money or programs or rules from HUD, they have to do what the federal government says are the standards. When you look at the projects, I said, it's just math. I mean, so you can't have affordable rentals at $3,000 if it needs to be $1,500 or $900. So you just need to look at the math. But what I heard from Indiana, which I think is a good point for the committee to consider, is there. I mean, she's new as chair of Housing and Human Services, and I guess there's some new members. So it seems like it will make sense for us to keep the land use capital item and to, over the next year, work closely with housing to identify, develop some more specifics. Your thoughts on that?
I think it makes sense, given what she said. I was actually leaning the other way, but this makes more sense. Yeah, that makes more sense, yeah.
Yeah,
Is there any way that we can figure out how the city looks at the AMI instead of it like being like federal? Like, is there any way that we can go, hey,
well, that's a separate conversation on the, but as I point out, at least from my perspective, a lot of what the city is doing, if they're working with federal money or even state money, those programs come with their guidelines, so they say what the limits are. But those limits are giving you, in many cases, the ceiling. They're not saying you have to be there. So for example, there are subsidy programs that you can go to 165% of AMI and still be considered affordable. Just because you can go to 165 doesn't mean you need to allow a developer to go that far. You might say, for this project, it doesn't make sense, because if you go that far, you might as well call it market rate. So it goes to, I think, in the resolution that we passed in terms of planning and design guidelines, of looking at what is affordable in the community. And since we're not at the table, have our elected officials bring up in the conversations, what is affordable to the people who live there? And if there's range, well, how is that affordability being reflected in what's being built?
how long is it, like a study that can be done, and just like how the way that the city's like broken up into places, like to break the community board.
But they do.
The community in like saying like, oh, like, since this area is this amount of income, like, it should be
Every year, what is that? The housing and vacancy study that's done every year in some cycle, that is broken down by community board. You can pull it up online. That's my point. You can look at your community board or any community board and say, Washington's Inwood, how does it compare to the Upper West Side?
What's the name of that study?
I think it's the housing and vacancy study. So I mean, the data exists. We can, any member of the public can pull it up online and, look at that. I mean, there's census data.
HUD has that as well.
Hmm?
HUD has that as well,
Yes.
because they offer different types of grants and monies for people in certain communities. And they do have the AMI and adjusted gross income of individuals and what they need to make in order to get those grants and those.
Yes, and
That is available.
there are some programs where the project site needs to be in a census tract that has certain,
It has to be an improvement district.
Right.
And there are a lot of improvement districts in this area.
Right.
But I don't think people understand what that means. So they bypass all of that because there's so many tax incentives for those improvement districts. But it could be one block or one area and then the next one, not so.
Exactly.
much. So it's
Exactly.
scattered around
Yeah,
the neighborhood.
but my point is, it's not that we need to do another study. That
Absolutely.
information exists.
Mhm. It
People
does.
just need to use it or understand how to access it and use it.
And it needs to be presented in a way for people to understand it, because the way it's done, it's so confusing for so many people. So I think
Including developers.
includes developers. So if someone's to break it down and explain to people what this actually means for the consumer, for the developer, and all peoples and parties involved, I think it'll be so much better.
You
And I
gotta
think,
answer questions.
and it would answer a lot of questions as to how this money is allocated to certain groups and certain developers and certain programs,
So I think there's general consensus that we should keep the capital. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Committee members in favor? Opposed or abstaining? And once again, members of the public, if you would like to vote, those in favor? Opposed or abstaining?
we're abstaining for right now. We need to do.
Nope, that is.
As
perfectly
Wayne
fine.
correctly pointed out, there's no obligation for community members to vote. If you don't say anything technically, you're abstaining in the old-fashioned way. Right?
Yeah.
But if, we encourage your input because it amplifies what the committee is saying and then gives more context. So that's why if you would like to vote, we find that helpful to us.
Right.
Chair, I'm not on the committee, right? Is that where we landed?
If you're not, but board members can vote,
Okay,
so
so I
as a
vote
board member, how would you like to vote?
in favor. And the same for the last vote about
Okay.
getting the consultant.
Who's that?
That's Indiana Portal.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we're gonna make a suggestion, to modify the agenda a bit. I was going to walk us through the land use 101 presentation that I, shared with you. But it's just after 8, which is not to say it's late, but what I would like to do instead is to spend some time to discuss the charter revision proposals. Because that's going to be on the ballot next month, but also on October 15th, the Furman Center at NYU is having a discussion about this, that I think this is something that we might want to spend some time on. So is everyone okay with like deferring the walkthrough of the land use 101 to November?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So what Catherine Diaz, the board chair, shared with me is Community Board 1 passed a resolution at their June meeting concerning the charter revision. But I also shared with you where recently the Historic Districts Council shared information and their concerns with some of the proposals. And what I think that CB1 did rather well, and we aim to do that in our president, is to look at all of the components of any proposal and not to say blanketly that we love it all or hate it all. There are some things in there they said they support and some things they don't support. And similarly with interestingly, the concerns that the Historic Districts Council have raised are echoed in the concerns that the City Club have raised. So I think there are 5 items that there were going to be 6, but I think 1 was eliminated. So they're talking about 5. So in the reso passed by CB1, one of the things they pointed out is if this is passed, the Uniform Land Use Review Process, which is ULURP, the way that goes is right now it goes to community boards first. We have 60 days to review and comment. After we do that, it goes to the borough president. The borough president has 60 days to review and comment. This would take our 60-day process, the borough president's 30-day process, and make them happen at the same time. So instead of having a 90-day process, it's a total 60-day process. And the concern is you're shortening the amount of time. At least I know in our interactions, in many cases, the borough president has waited to see what are our thoughts before they, complete theirs. And if it's happening at the same time, that would not work. So their concern was, shortening that makes it, a little more complex to get the feedback.
I'm sorry, Wayne, who is proposing that?
This is part of the mayor's 2025 New York City Charter, Revision Commission. And as you may recall, there was some controversy about that because the City Planning Commission was looking at some initiatives, but the way the law currently works, if the mayor, any mayor, if they propose a charter revision commission, it supersedes anything the council is talking about.
So it's a ballot proposal.
Yeah, it's a ballot proposal. If I, what might be useful, if I could just, get to the key points of contention, I think this was useful, in Historic Districts Council's article, which I sent to everyone. It's diminishing the power of the city council. It increases the power, the control of the mayor, and some of the language is misleading. And I think the last set of ballot proposals, there were things that borough presidents were responsible for, and had authority over, that were taken away and was basically put under the mayor. So the concern is that there's a concentration of, control and power under the mayor. And it's already moved stuff away from borough presidents, and now it's moving stuff away from the city council. And there's, more detail of that. In the city club, which is filed, I guess, an amicus brief, they're basically saying a couple things. One is the actions taken by this commission really should have triggered a CEQA review, an environmental review, and that has been completely sidestepped. And in addition to that, they're also pointing out that, the proposals could cause, a loss, not a gain of, and I think the key word here is genuinely affordable housing. And that, some of the language is misleading because it provides sort of in very positive way what would be the result if you vote yes. And if you vote no, this says you're going to lose housing. It said voting no doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose housing, but for that matter, voting yes does not mean you're going to gain housing. That's not demonstrated. So the language, and I think the city council has also pointed out that the way it's presented is a little misleading. And the other concern is, and this I guess is not just a concern in the city, that the process is bypassing, sort of checks and balances, and that, certain pathways that are being prescribed to expedite things would really remove the city council from reviewing land use decisions and putting more power in the mayor or in bodies that are controlled by or created by the mayor. And one of the impacts they pointed out is, we talked about fast track approvals, and we were just talking about how long it takes to do projects. But one of the things that could be done under the guise of allowing sort of minor projects, in higher density districts like ours, you could increase the residential density by 30% without having any requirements for affordability. So, I'm not saying that, and I don't know, and this is something that, Jim could probably provide some guidance on, because in the past, I don't recall if we or community boards have commented on ballot proposals, and whether that is appropriate or not, we should be informed, and we could certainly point out things that, folks need to pay attention to. And I would say that the October 15th panel discussion, I'm going to try to, I think it's on Zoom. I'm going to try to participate in that to get more information, because I think the intent of streamlining is fine, cutting through red tape, but as they say, the proof is in the pudding. And if what is said is not what is going to happen, then we need to be concerned with that. And going back to the question that OC raised, some of the major concerns pertain to the process itself. If there was genuine interest in looking at how do we do this, why isn't the city council and the mayor's office working together on it, as opposed to saying, I have the ability to preempt you. And so I'm gonna do that. And in structuring these proposals, I'm gonna, cut you out. Having said
Yeah.
that, I would point out that, the Regional Planning Association and others, as I said, support the initiatives, in theory, and even, CB1 supports some things, but they point out you need to be mindful of anything that would remove the council or the community boards from the process. And there are some things that are poorly defined, and we cannot support things where it's gonna be fair if you're not defining what does that mean in legislative terms. Jim?
Yeah, no, allow me to comment. To begin with, we never discuss candidates, obviously. That's
Mhm.
beyond our whatever. But I think Wayne's point is well taken, because what is being proposed is a significant change in the process. Over the years, there have been several attempts to weaken community boards. Some people find us, we're an irritant, who are these people who are trying to tell us what to do? They find it very irritating. So I think at the very least, and this is, and it might be an interesting topic for the executive committee.
Exactly.
We could certainly comment on what we see as the effects of this thing. Maybe not so far as to making a suggestion as to what the public should do, but and then we have overlords in terms of conflict of interest and stuff like that who tell us what the real laws are. But we can, the thing is, at the moment, we actually have free speech for now. And so because as Wayne alluded to, these things would weaken. Basically, there are some people out there who don't like the fact that if a city council person, the way the city council currently works, if there's a big project and a city council person doesn't want it, basically the rest of the city council will go along with them and not approve it. Now, the fact that they changed the rules, the city council could still do the same thing. But insofar as it reduces input, community input in particular, this is a bad thing. So I think, off the top of my head, we can certainly comment on what we feel the ramifications are. But again, we might need guidance as to how far we can go, because whether we make recommendations or not, that'd be another story. So that's my thinking on the matter.
Yes.
So after reading the city, the city club's review of it, I was completely on board, and I was surprised that Community Board 1 unanimously approved this until I looked at the dates.
But they didn't unanimously approve it. I mean, what they approved is they opposed, consolidating the community board and borough president review in one, which is what we discussed. So they opposed that. They supported allocating additional time and resources to extraordinarily complex projects. So that was another thing. They supported improved, earlier, more accessible public notice, which we certainly would. They affirmed the value of the current roles of community boards, borough presidents, and the commission. They declined to endorse anything that is an undefined fair share.
Well, then why on the,
Well, no, but see, that's my point is,
it's a conditional approval, you're
but
saying?
no, they broke it down into 10 different things. And so they unanimously supported a resolution, but each.
With those conditions.
In some things, they're supporting, they're approving the support, and in other cases, they're supporting the rejection. So it's more nuanced. That's why I say, they did a good job of breaking it down and say, we like this, we don't like that.
Okay,
And we don't understand this, and so we're gonna do anything if you're not gonna tell us what it means.
okay, so just again, going back to the city club, I looked at a summary of the city clubs. I'm curious, and I think even suspicious of what the motive actually was of this charter revision. And I'll just throw that out there. I don't know
Well,
if,
I mean, obviously it's gonna be a different administration anyways than the one that appointed
Right.
the charter commission, so we don't necessarily even have to be so concerned though about the
That's
possible motives.
But when you think about it, if at the end of the day, the role of the city council, the borough president, and the community board is eliminated or diminished, it doesn't matter who the mayor is, they still have more power concentrated under them. And the question is that what we think is a good way to proceed?
As a community board, do we think that it would be more like a more narrow approach of just commenting on the ULURP as it has to do with community boards would be kind of more within our scope, or also the effect on city council and their process?
Well, I mean, it's not, I mean, the Euler process impacts us all.
Yeah,
But
but
we-
specifically the community board part in it.
Well, but I mean, community boards have the ability and the responsibility to comment on anything that impacts, their community. So, but if we're saying, if we did it along the lines, and maybe we don't need to, as Jim said, go into this level of detail, we can just focus on the impact. We think condensing the amount of time that we and the borough president have to review and coordinate together is a bad thing.
Yeah.
We could say it's a bad thing.
Mhm.
And if we think that, eliminating the community board and the city council and the borough president from reviewing certain land use actions, I mean, it's kind of a process that, goes, we provide our input to others. And if we're saying eliminating us from that review process is a bad thing or is questionable, we can certainly say that.
Yeah, and if this kind of different vein, but if this did, end up passing, I'm sure there would be a way that we could work, at least in terms of how it impacts the community board and the borough president, by putting that time together, work to make sure that the community board, land use committee and community board is able to have the recommendations into the borough president.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I would say that, as, you get the experience of having to deal with some of the more complicated projects. In some cases, we have multiple meetings and it's like, we don't quite understand what's going on. And that 60-day time frame, in some cases, we get the notice at a really weird time. And it cuts into our 60 days. And in other cases, it is so complicated. Like if it is a city-wide initiative, or if it's hitting the entire zoning resolution, which I think is 1,000 pages long, it can take a long time to understand what's going on. And in some cases, like with City of Yes, and there were 3 different City of Yes, but understanding, I think in City of Yes for housing, there were, I think, 14 parts to that. And I think we did a good job of identifying what we agreed with, what we didn't agree with, and what we recommended change. But it took time to go through 14 parts, because otherwise we could have said, other than, oh, we don't like it. But what was the it?
Yeah.
There were 14 different pieces, and some of it made no sense to reject, and other pieces it made no sense to accept. So, I mean, the point is, it can take a lot of time. And we've had the good fortune of having borough presidents who say they want to wait to hear our input before, or at least they want to be informed by that and factor that in. Because the other thing is, community boards have the ability to recommend. Our recommendations do not have any force of law. The borough president and the city council rep, they have the ability to say, community board told us X, and if you don't do that, we're not approving it.
Wayne, if I may just add one thing, I worked on the 2019 Charter Revision Commission doing outreach and education about the ballot proposals.
During the summer?
Yeah, well, I mean, not
Exactly.
2019 about ranked choice voting and things like that.
Okay.
Not the one that like made changes to the community board in 2018 or anything after, but the one thing I would say is the CV1's approach where they highlight the pieces that they like and they don't like, in theory makes sense, but whenever you are talking to voters, right? Like, I think that it's going to be important to say, like, you know, because we're not dividing out the proposals. Each proposal has subpoints. And so even though we can say like we like this part of it or not, ultimately the voter needs to decide yes or no on the full aspect, all of the aspects of each proposal. And so it's helpful to identify what parts we like and we don't, but I think ultimately like we should come up with a, if we can, a yes or no recommendation for each question.
Right.
Otherwise it's just kind of like, I don't know, we don't move the ball any.
Yeah, that's a good point. And as in looking at both the Historic Districts Council's points and the city club, but I think it probably also reconciles what CV1 did. It's really questions 2, 3, and 4 that are raising the questions about removing the city council involvement and allowing the Board of Standards and Appeals, for example, to do stuff. And we know the Board of Standards and Appeals is a very different standard than if it was going through a ULURP. Reducing the review time. So, you know, we could say that, as Jim pointed out, the negative impacts of, you know, proposals 2, 3, and 4 in terms of, you know, eliminating or diminishing the role of the city council and community boards and increasing control of mayor is of concern. And, you know, we would recommend that they not be adopted. I would say the other two, like simplifying, you know, that simplifying it because creating a digital map to modernize operations is kind of what we were talking about in our planning study. Seems like a good thing to do. And, you know, move local elections to presidential year is something that, you know, maybe we don't need to comment on. But it's like the question of fast tracking affordable housing. Does it really do reviewing what they consider to be modest and establishing this appeals board that would take the place of, I guess, the city council? Those are the ones where there's concern that it's really diminishing, you know, the role of the council and the community board and just increasing that of the mayor. Jim?
Yeah, based, as you know, my first time I spoke, I was relatively equivocal on purpose. But I think two things have convinced me to be less equivocal on this issue of commenting on the city council, you know, or the charter revisions or whatever. One of them was what Indiana said, and of course, I very often enjoy hearing what Indiana has to say. I enjoy her thoughtfulness. The other thing is, in some sense, Community Board 1, by doing what they did, you know, sort of indicated that this is something that one can do because I'm sure they have counsel also. And, you know, if they would have been told, you know, don't comment on this or whatever. So I think, you know, I'm going to lean more toward what Indiana has been proposing. I think mainly we really want to do the education thing. We want to explain to people why we think whatever proposal is before us is a bad proposal or maybe a good proposal. I think in this case it's a bad one. But we should be, you know, more proactive in indicating what we think they ought to do about it. Because as I pointed out, and this has just been a constant theme, and I've been on this board for like 44 years, but there will be term limits, unfortunately. You know, they've been trying to weaken community boards since the beginning of time. They find this to be a real pain in the neck, and you know, so I've changed my views. Thank you.
So, we could take the approach of saying that we want to pass a resolution, you know, sort of short, sweet, and to the point. That we are concerned with the potential adverse impacts of questions 2, 3, and 4, and would recommend they not be supported. And I mean, it doesn't need to be anything as long or as detailed as, what CB1 did. I mean, if we're not commenting on, something, then, we are, I guess, tacitly in support of it, or we could say that while we understand the intent of the proposal and the way they're written, 2, 3, and 4 are of concern.
You're putting a
Was
slightly different tack on it, which is consistent with what you're saying. We as a community board comment, have every right to comment on the structure of the
Mhm.
government and, how it ought to be structured to work optimally. And we're just commenting on the structural issue that someone wants to change. So,
Right.
that adds to the, rationale for our doing this.
Eitan and then Heidi.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, like what Jim's saying, like, we're not really recommending how people should vote on this resolution. We're recommending more.
We're,
what we think this
we're
process should
concerned
be.
with the potential negative impacts if it is enacted as written or something like that. And what we typically do is, vote on, the sort of the resolution in principle, but then we circulate the written copy so people have the ability to wordsmith it to get it right before it goes to the board for vote.
For whatever reason, I can't raise my hand.
Heidi and then Elsie, go ahead.
Okay.
So on the ballot proposal 2, which is the first one we're talking about, I was looking, I don't know if I'm looking at the wrong thing, but I think I have the Charter Revision Commission's report. And in that report, they do not recommend shortening the 60-day community board review period. So I assume that none of us knows why it was, and ultimately the proposal became to shorten it to 30 days. But I think if we're thinking about maybe a resolution, it might be worth pointing out that originally the commission task of reviewing, the feasibility of these proposals did not recommend shortening that. I don't know if that came up in in HDC or city clubs.
It didn't come up there, but I mean, on their website, we can pull up the complete report, which I think is 184 pages. But I mean, it would be interesting if the report didn't recommend that. What's the process by which it went from not recommending that to making that in the ballot proposal?
Right. So that is something that concerns me in terms of what happened there.
Lucy?
Yeah, the other concern for me anyway is that if you think about how many proposals came in just before the summer, right after all the meetings we had, and we didn't have time, or we couldn't really comment because a lot of the recommendation happened during the summer. And sometimes I feel that
It's done on purpose.
it's kind of done. Thank you for saying that. It's like you just took the words out of my mouth. And so I think we should note something about that in our resolution, if we're going with a resolution, because I feel that at least the city should know that we are aware that this is sometimes being done purposely for a reason. So that's my
Yeah.
my point on that.
I think we just first need to check also and see when that report was released, because I understand what you're saying, but I don't know if necessarily it was released sort of close to the summer, or if it was released online with not a lot of publicity months before that. Actually, I'm reading through this, I think so, it was April 30th. And then there was an interim report in July, but we can certainly say something about that these, proposals that have such an impact on the land use process should have required or should have received, I guess, more visibility and allow more time for residents and community boards to, review and digest what they mean and what the impacts are. So, yeah.
I think one thing, oh, Jose has maybe added the report and it looks like it's from July 21st.
Right, but I think that was, there was something done in April, but if the actual report in July, I mean, that would go to OC's point, because we're not in session in July.
If anything, I would say we should not only just point that out, we should really actually request to not hand out, not like sending a request for review just before the summer.
Yeah, but we did a resolution to that and years ago, it had no impact. And I think if we're focusing on, what's going to be on the ballot next month, we need to be focused on, pay attention to, folks need to pay attention to X, Y, and Z. So in theory, we could have a motion to pass a resolution indicating that, we're concerned with the potential negative impacts of ballot proposals 2, 3, and 4 as they impact the land use review process and the roles of community boards, the city council, borough presidents, and we're also concerned with the timing and release of information.
I don't know, like, if any of us mentioned it, but just kind of like skimming through that report. It's saying that it's like only eligible for affordable housing. It's like every building being built in New York City gonna be affordable housing? I don't know, I'm just asking. Like, is like every building from now on gonna be
But you know the answer, to your question, right? Of course it's not. But the point is, it's saying these initiatives are going to streamline the development of affordable housing, but it then raises the persistent question of how is affordability being defined? How, if it's affordable housing, how is it that some of the initiative would allow you to increase the density of a proposal of a building by 30% without having any affordability requirements? So you can call it one thing, but as going through and seeing what folks pointed out, it doesn't necessarily do what it says it does.
It's almost like that thing that they did, they built some building in Brooklyn and then they threw all the affordable housing in the van.
No, that's not it.
Okay.
I mean, the point is, if you have a subsidy program or a financing program, and it says affordability can have different tiers, and we've argued for that because, people make different, but if your affordability level is 165% of whatever that is, in some cases, you might even be able to go up to twice. If you're making if AMI is $100,000, and you might argue that's a lot of money. In Manhattan, it's not, but that's a lot of money. What they're saying is you can make $165,000 a year, and that still qualifies. I mean, in terms of household income, and that still qualifies as affordable housing. And in some projects, you'll find tiers where there's some at 40%, 60%, 80%, 110%, and in others, and there was one I saw a couple of years ago in East Harlem where all of them were at one level and it was at the top level. So it's not that, the new construction is here and the affordable is there. And some people argue that's a good thing because, they needed the resources there. This is saying that there's concern with how you're seeking to streamline a process that in theory is supposed to develop affordable housing, but you're not having any mechanism in place that really does that. All you're really doing is concentrating the review and approval process more under the mayor and eliminating the ability of the city council and community boards to be part of that.
Sounds like the old switcheroo. I'll pull the rug on that.
Right now, the process is that community board gets it for 30 days and.
60
For 60 days,
in Euler,
okay, in Euler, and the borough president's office
30.
then starts their 30 days?
Yes.
Or they're not looking at it for the entire night?
Well, no, they may be looking, but the point is their review process does not formally begin until ours has ended.
Has ended,
And-
once they get your information,
Right.
their process.
So, but I mean, as I said, in our experience, like the borough president rep will either, attend our meetings or we'll share questions with them while we are reviewing it. What this would do is say that their review process and our review process are happening at the same time. So it's not as if, we can go through all of ours, and in some cases, we might still have open issues, but we'll take those issues and we'll kind of forward them to the borough president's office and they will continue to pursue them. That would no longer be able to happen because once we're done, it's done.
And it's not like you have a whole bunch of time left over at the end of the 60 days.
No, we never,
Right?
never. We typically ask for more time. Which is another point. We typically say 60 days for some of these, conflict, it's not enough. Or depending upon, as OC has pointed out, when it's sent, you sent it and, we missed the first week of it because it was a holiday or something. How
So I think I sort of agree with the idea that it's sort of diminishing community board power and community board input by shortening the time period. But I was also wondering to what extent it's like they needed to trim the timeline somewhere because there's now an entire appeal process that is being introduced in a new appeals board that is going to take however many days. And the whole point of this is to shorten this process and reduce red tape, but we're also adding new boards and new bureaucratic things at the tail end of something.
But they're really not, they're not introduced, they're removing the council vote.
Right.
And I think, and if the council votes, the mayor can veto it. Or if it sits for, so they're removing that and they're replacing it with the board. So it's not as if you're having the regular process and another process. They're actually removing it and saying you've got the mayor, the borough president, and the council speaker. They'll be on this board and they'll decide what the final thing is. And why is that an improvement, I guess?
Right. You're looking at me like I know the answer.
No, I'm saying, so we don't, I mean, I think we need to raise the question that we're concerned with, what are the potential, adverse impacts or maybe unintended adverse of, these changes and, removing the council and completely and saying, well, just the speaker and the mayor. It almost goes back to, if you think about state government, they talk about the 3 men in the back room. You're sort of creating that as at the tail end of your land use review process. Why is that a good thing?
And that's on top of the City of Yes changes where they can, as long as they do commit to a certain percentage of affordable housing, they can already, build higher than they were going to. It seems like it's a lot of change. Like City of Yes, I think will be a big change. And to then add this on top seems imprudent to me.
Yeah, Jim?
Yeah, to amplify that, excluding the city council, which is our legislature from this process seems, problematic, let's put it that way. And then the only other suggestion is, rather than use the phrase, about community board input, we like to see ourselves as the input of the community itself as their representative. So There's just a change of phraseology. It's not community board input. It's community input as expressed by the community board. Because again, that pretty much is the function the council gives us. And just as an aside for anyone who's new here, one of the natures of community boards is we're supposed to be completely parochial. We're supposed to worry about our community board. The other community boards worry about their districts. That's just how it works, because that way we're a relatively pure advocate for our district. And that's, you know, part of the rationale for the creation of the boards.
I love that, and this thing is just like, it goes here. UNEP has worked well for so many types of projects and procedures and steady pipelines of public and private land use action to help city grow and change over time. Why put that in there if it's been working for so long, and then to change it to just expedite it to make it grow faster? Like, you can't grow a seed and then tell the tree to grow faster. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So I'm pretty sure it was like someone that was just like, we gotta make this like much faster. Like, we gotta just hurry up and like get these buildings built. Like,
Are you saying
can't do that. Yeah,
who,
yeah. Everything takes time.
who's paying whom? So,
Cause then it'll be an issue somewhere down the line where they're like, why did we change this?
it'll be an issue, I think, along the lines of what Heidi brought up. There's so many things that are now permissible under City of Yes, and I thought about that 30%. That how do these ballot proposals, at least the ballot proposals that pertain to land use review, how do they interact with or impacted by City of Yes? Because if you have in a medium and high density district, which we are in, if you can increase the density of a project by 30% under an expedited review, and there's no affordability requirement, how does it impact the City of Yes requirements where you could only get certain zoning bonus if there's affordability? So is there a way of saying, okay, we're doing it under the expedited review to get 30%, we're not doing it under the city? So, you know, and maybe that's a city planning question, but, you know, how do they work together? And there are people who are paid to, you know, go through the, you know, zoning resolution, all that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because it's necessary given how complicated it is to say, well, you can do this under this provision, and you can do that on, and sort of piggyback different regulations. And so how do they all work together is the question. But it's so I can get a sense of, do we want to adopt the resolution that is expressing concern about those three, Res 2, 3, and 4, about their potential negative impacts and how they impact the public review process? Yes, no?
Yeah, that's good.
Who would move that?
I move it. Second.
So, once again, we're first going to vote for committee members, then board members, and then members of the public. So committee members in favor? Board members? I guess
I'm in
Indiana,
favor.
you'll have to say.
I'm in favor.
Yeah, no, she didn't put her hand up because I can't see her. That was Tosi. And members of the public, if you would like to vote in favor. Opposed or abstaining? Okay, so there we have it.
So you gotta find another way to make some money, you know? Cause it's like, just like looking at this, they're like, oh, we're trying to save money. It's like, no, you guys are trying to get all the money to give, to take or I don't know what they're actually trying to do, but that's what it seems like. To save money on this lofty process.
Or to kowtow to developers.
penny, but spend $1.
Oh, is there any old business?
Here, there was one thing, if I could just throw in there related to this ballot proposal.
Okay.
I wasn't sure, I was actually just thinking last night, I wasn't sure if we were allowed to invite people to come to speak with us about it, like, to hear, I believe that, like, what does our council member think? What does the borough president think? The fact that the city didn't come to present about the ballot proposals to a community board, says a lot, I think. So I was thinking, and our meeting is next week on the 16th. So if we do get anybody who wants to come, I will certainly let you guys know.
I see no reason why our city council representatives can't share with us their perspective.
Okay, so I will let you
And-
know what they say.
And in the past, we've had people from the Charter Revision Committee
Mhm.
come to the community board and speak to us about
Yep.
why. So that's,
Yeah.
there's definitely, that has happened before.
Yeah, and I did ask the folks at the Historic Districts Council who've worked with us before if they wanted to come and, elaborate on, their concerns. They were, however, I think presenting at CB7, so they were not able to make it.
Thank you.
Is there anything further, or is there a motion to adjourn? That was new business. Oh, because I said this ballot proposal wasn't on there, so we did that under news. Is there other new business?
Yeah. When we start now?
Yes.
No. Why I came to the zoning thing is because I wanna get the zoning for a certain property here that's completely, what do you say, contaminated. Where I can build on. It's not a residential thing because people can't live there. That's why the house there being built was stopped. Because it was 300 years of pollution in Washington Heights. On, down there in Nagel, on, Fairview Avenue and 190th Street, where the tunnel is. 300 years of pollution. And my goal is to save the tunnel from all that dirt, water coming in. They spend millions of dollars every year trying to paint that place and make it nice. They're doing it wrong. You gotta go and do it a different way to stop the water from coming in. And
So,
they can't do it.
Vic, if you could state your name for the record.
Okay, my name is Paul Hintersteiner. I'm representing Arts into Action, Hintersteiner Gallery, my father and mother own. I don't know if
And
some of you remember.
the property that you're talking about, which is I think the access tunnel to the subway, is that a property that is city owned, privately owned? Cause you said you wanna do something
Yeah,
with zoning, but
The
what in
Parks
particular?
Department takes care of the tunnel.
Right, but what's
And
what's the zoning issue?
It's RX.
No, but what's the zoning issue?
Zoning is built the cultural center there above the subway station and the other two properties. Get them because you can't build residential district there because it's too polluted. That house stopped because of the pollution. The people get sued 7 years, 8 down a year, and the company gets sued because they get cancer. Because the land is polluted. I can turn it into a business where I can have over 100 people working, and it'll be a convention center, 3 floors of convention center for the community and around the area for businesses to come and have training, and also have parties there for people, like anybody here that has kids or anything like this, that come in and have parties. There'll be a kitchen there, they can prepare food there or bring their own. I'm not gonna do any cooking. I want them to use the restaurants and the places around here to build up the business. And have people come in and have 2 floors of art gallery.
So it impresses me that, while there may be a a need for a zoning action, the very first thing that you would need to do is to work with probably city parks to get to get concurrence on the type of project you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm gonna mention it.
Is there a little E designation on that property?
Is there a what?
The whole
thing, the
synopsis is there.
Right, but my point is, there is, it's not something where the land use committee or community board 12, you know, can act on a request for zoning anything. If it's city-owned land and you're proposing to build something, whether it's just on the land or over the tunnel, then the city of New York, through whatever agency, needs to agree to that. And, if they do, what we were just talking about, if there's then a zoning action that's required, you or they would submit the application for that and it would come to us. But we don't just say, well, we're gonna do that.
The two properties.
No, but do you get what I'm saying? That something needs to come
I
to
have a
us.
comment as well at some point, Wayne.
Yes,
Um,
and it's Danny had his hand up and then you.
Sure.
I love this website because of this, the property that you're talking about, is it on Broadway and Fairview? That there's like a abandoned building. They stopped it. That building is owned by a company called 4452 Broadway Owner LLC. So it's not owned by the city.
I know that one and the next one too.
And the other one is also owned by someone privately, and I believe that tunnel is not administered by parks, it's administered by DOT. Is that whole tunnel is administered by DOT?
Confusing thing.
What?
Parks clean it.
Yeah, careful with the back and forth, and it's right, because it's DOT and parks, and we have issue with that. Jim?
Right, well, that access tunnel, I believe is still owned by DOT. It's considered a street. So there's that issue. The real issue of what gets built, and then the other piece is, and by the way, I believe Danny pointed out, you know, it's not Parks property, because that's a whole other story, because if you want to do anything other than park with Parks property, you have to get the state legislature involved. We protect our parks very strongly. But the real issue there, which Mr. Hintersteiner was alluding to, is the pollution, and that would be totally under, you know, the EPA, and they would have to weigh in, and probably you know, it's not even an issue of whether or not you can serve food or cook food. If the pollution levels are high enough, you simply cannot build there, and you cannot have an enclosed space there because it's dangerous. So, you know, and of course, on the other hand, at the moment, that derelict structure is an eyesore. But you know, and then, you know, there may, again, I don't know anything about its engineering. There may be, there's enough of it there that one could actually resume building it. Don't know. But it's a very complicated issue.
Yeah.
And the one thing it probably has very little to do with is zoning.
Exactly. It's
I looked at the law.
yeah, but but understand what we're saying is, at this juncture, there isn't a zoning action or issue for Community Board 12 to discuss or consider. If there is a project that comes through either a city agency, and it sounds like the property isn't even on city land, so it'll be a private owner that has a ULURP or a BSA, there's something that's being changed for zoning, then that would come to us. But at this juncture, we don't do it in reverse. We don't say we're changing, you know, the zoning based upon a project. And, you know, once again, we were just talking earlier about how expensive it is to build anything. So when you say you're going to do this project, you know, what's the design, what's the cost, you know, who's the development team, you know, there's a lot that goes into that would need to be presented, you know, to the community board and maybe to, you know, Parks and Cultural Affairs, if it's gonna be a community use building, to see what it is we're talking about. So there's a lot of work to do
Oh,
to
yeah.
get to the point where there's something for us to do.
Yeah, but also you're under zoning, so I just wanna double check the zoning because I checked it on the end line.
Right, but I mean, as Jim said, and I would reiterate, at this juncture, the very last thing to discuss is the zoning.
Yeah, but you can read that and see what.
Right.
And the whole project,
Yes,
you know what I mean? And then we can go from there.
yeah, but whether it's R72 or C44, it doesn't matter. What's the project, and how realistic is it?
Yeah.
Who's doing what?
No, I understand,
But I wanna say the tunnel.
But you have no choice. The tunnel, if the tunnel is considered a city street and the tunnel provides access, what you want to do with it isn't the point. The city is, what does the city require to be done with it?
You would have to go to traffic and transportation for
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not even that. It's like, if you think about it, we don't kind of willy-nilly say, you know, we're gonna do this. It's like, if it's owned by the DOT, I mean, it's owned by the city of New York under this jurisdiction of a city agency. And it's not just that, well, we're gonna do something, you know, with that.
Yeah.
You might, I mean, and it's different than saying you're proposing, let's say, an art installation. But you know, anyway, so, but we digress. As they say. Is there any other old or new business? Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
It is 9:01. We are adjourned. We welcome our, you know, guests, and, I, by the way, am an architect. And, you know, we welcome the participation of, you know, you do not have to be on the community board to attend committee meetings and to contribute. So folks who have interest and expertise are always welcome.
And this is one committee.
Yeah.
For the board, which.
No, what about, yeah, but who's?
Yeah, there, say that again?
It seems like the perfect one.
Exactly. And we do not we typically meet the first Wednesday of the month, but in October you have all of these holidays, so that's why we're on the second Thursday, but normally, you know, if you come and see us the first Wednesday at 7:00, that's us.
And we can always get voice on Zoom also.
Absolutely. If you sign up to get the notices,
No.
you can also sign up to
Okay,
just get the
thank you.
links repeatedly.
Okay,
Take care.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
No name on it.
Thank you.
Just,
Very